the previous videos, we mentioned the result as obtained from the investigation program for your research study. It is important for us to choose appropriate methods to present the results, either by using the tables or using the figures. We know that there are different modes of presentations, having their own characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages. There are also some common mistakes while using the figures and tables. We also discuss about various methods of presenting the results. The principle behind it is the purpose of presenting those results. What kind of information or message that you would like to deliver to the reader shall govern how you present the results. In these videos, we're going to discuss about the strategies of analyzing results. You know that a typical research must have some purpose or objectives. Those objectives will later be translated into the research program, which involve investigations, and there will be some mechanisms or measurements. Normally, during this research program, we have determined the manipulated variables and have also identified the parameters to be studied. Of course, in order for you to acquire the parameters that you would like to study, there will be an extensive literature review for you to identify which parameters is likely to influence the performance or the response of the subject that you are studying. Then through these measurements, you will be able to obtain the data. Those are raw data as acquired from the measuring instruments or some mechanisms of collecting the data responding to the manipulated variables that you have incorporated inside the research program. This data, it will be the responding variables. Sometimes you will have to check if there are any systematic errors within the data. If there is any systematic errors, correction should be done in order to eliminate those errors. This systematic error, sometimes it will be due to the limitations of your system or setup. As long as you can find a mechanism to remove it, your data should be applicable for your study. Of course, by all means, you should prevent any systematic errors. However, sometimes it could be due to some difficulty of acquiring the perfect conditions without systematic error, or it is not economical or unpractical for you to totally eliminate the systematic error during the investigation program. But you know that systematic error can easily be eliminated. Other than that, there could be parallax error or the other errors caused by some mistake during the investigation program, which this kind of error must be avoided as they could spoil your data. Based on the data that you have acquired, you will need to process those data with some forms of computations or interpretations, which is later transformed into the results. You can say that the data are the pieces of information as acquired from the investigation program, and the result is more meaningful to your investigations after you have done processing it or analyzing it. This result can be the derived variables, and it provides factual information to reflect the subject that you are studying. Then, based on the data and the result acquired, normally you need to go through a process of verifications or validations. Specifically, you are talking about the evaluations of the reliability and the accuracy of your data. Some may require to determine the validity of the data in the case that you are doing the questionnaire surveys. Theoretically, you need to properly verify and validate your data and results. Only when they are proven reliable, accurate, and valid, those data and results are meaningful to your investigations. If you found that the reliability and accuracy is not there, most likely you have to restart your investigation program, rectify the errors, and then redo the verifications and validations until it is proven reliable and accurate. Now that you have done the validations or verifications, you know that the result to some extent at the acceptable level, reflecting the subject that you would like to study and providing adequate information for you to understand your subjects. Then you shall proceed with the interpretations or the discussions of the results. This will be the part that you are trying to understand, explain, and discuss the research topic. I guess up to the stages here, most of the students can do, because our students are normally well trained with this, which are typical civil engineering students in their bachelor degree must at least have gone through 3 series of experimental tests in various fields of civil engineering. These 3 series of the laboratory works shall consist at least 36 types of the experimental tests related to civil engineering. Therefore, most of the students, they are well trained to carry out some experimental tests. They know what is data, and they know how they process the data in order to acquire the result. And most of the students know how they're going to interpret the data as well as discuss the results. And most of the students, they will reach at this level without thinking further on the next steps. You know that you are dealing with the postgraduate study. It is by fundamental a research study which have a clear directions in terms of the purpose of conducting the research. And you know that the research normally is carried out in order to make knowledge. Purely understanding something directly as an output from an experiment shall not be adequate at the postgraduate level. There should be an elevation from the interpretations and the discussions which are made on basis of the results and data. Based on what you have understand from the results, based on what you have observed from the trend of the results, or based on what you have interpreted, the tendency, similarity, or some informations as implied by the results, you will need to elevate further and dig deeper into all the informations and understanding which you have acquired from the investigation program. You could evaluate the results, setting some criteria or certain requirement, some further insights or generalizations in terms of the principles and concepts which you have acquired. There should be another level involving higher thinking order, such as appraising, evaluating, projecting, predicting, forecasting, formulating knowledge, and even generalizations for further applications. You are looking for something more rather than just interpreting and discussing the results. Let's say now you are dealing with certain things which the ultimate goal is for the applications. You may need to evaluate the applications conditions, translate them into certain requirement or criteria, which you may make comparison based on the performance of the products that you are developing to determine its feasibility or the applicability of those that you have developed, and then discuss further. Let's say now you are dealing with fundamental research. The ultimate goal here is to formulate some knowledge and principles based on the phenomena or based on the observations. You are able to make sense of what you have acquired from the results. Next, you would like to put them into some theories or the principles in order to explain the entire phenomena or the fundamental knowledge. There will be a transformations between some principles explaining what is actually happening to the things that you are studying, converting it into something which is more general, purely on basis of the principles, so that they can be adopted under the circumstances which is similar to the subject that you are studying, so that it is applicable in the broader context. And then next, you will have to be able to extract the value of the study. After you have done the elevations to something higher level, then you will need to create the values and the impacts to make it into something useful, meaningful, and for the applications. You would like to create the values and the impacts of the subject that you are studying. Not only the subject itself, the value should come from what you have acquired from the investigations, and the ultimate purpose of creating this value is to meet the purpose of your research study. And then after that, you can comfortably proceed with the conclusions and findings. The flow here shows a typical strategies of analyzing the results. It is depending on the nature of the study as well as the purpose of your study. Whichever it is, it builds on certain fundamentals where the ultimate purpose of conducting research is to formulate knowledge. Therefore, conducting an investigation program, acquiring data, processing the data to acquire the results, followed up by the interpretations and discussions, shall not be adequate for a postgraduate study, as the focus of the study is still fall within the boundary of the samples and specimen being investigated. But you know that your interest is not on the specimens. What you are normally trying to do here is you are creating specimens to closely simulate what you are intend to study in the reality. Sometimes because of the complexity in terms of the mixing parameters, you are unable to make direct investigations to the reality. But when you convert those investigations into a certain manageable level, you have the ability to manipulate the variables, and whichever the responding variable implies, it will be due to your manipulated variables. You have better confidence. Those responding variables is strongly correlated to whichever parameters that you have manipulated. Knowing the investigations about your specimen is not enough, because all the while the motivations of starting your research is still trying to understand the actual situations. Therefore, you will need to elevate your understanding to the level of actual situations instead of only to the level of specimens and the investigation program. This is why you need to elevate it. And then as you have elevated from there, it is meaningless regardless how good, how bombastic that you have elevated what you have studied. If there is no value out of those and it doesn't meet the purpose of your research, it is meaningless. Therefore, you will need to extract the value out of what you have found in your investigations to make it meaningful so that your entire research program is justified. Having the values and the impacts secured, you know that whichever finding and conclusions that you have acquired, it will be significant to the readers as well as to the research community within the field of study. If you are looking at the levels of thinking orders, in fact, producing the results, interpretations and discussions, they are actually up to the level 4 of the Bloom's taxonomy, which is at the level of analysis. You know that postgraduate study should not just stop at the level 4 of the Bloom's taxonomy, which is purely based on the analysis. You will need to justify your research, demonstrate that you have gone through a higher level of thinking order to the level of 5 and 6 in the Bloom's taxonomy, which involve designing something, synthesizing something, evaluating something, appraising something, which cannot be achieved without your critical thinking skill and without solid understanding of the first principles. Therefore, these two stages can help you to reach to the highest level of the thinking orders of the Bloom's taxonomy. If you know that your research is accomplished, reaching to the highest level of the Bloom's taxonomy, you feel more confidence in terms of the acceptance by your supervisor and the examiners, which are looking into the depth of your study as well. You can take this as a guide and always ask yourself about the levels of thinking order that you have gone through in order to acquire your conclusions and findings.